Hey guys, today I'm going to experiment with underpainting. Now, underpainting is something that you would normally do with oil painting or acrylic painting, which is where you would prepare your canvas with a layer of paint that sort of sets out your shapes and tones. And sometimes instead of just drawing on what you're painting, you would just take a neutral colored paint like brown or gray or something and just block out shapes. And that sort of helps you work on your composition before you actually go into the details and have to undo a whole bunch of stuff. And some people take this even further and do the entire painting in grayscale and then just glaze color over top of it. That's a really interesting technique, and I love the way that that looks, especially with things like water and skin tones and stuff like that. And if you want to have a whole lot of fun with color, you would paint out blocks of your painting in completely different bright colors. So when you put the layers on afterward, a little bit of that color will show through in the texture, and it's very interesting. There are a lot of different ways to do this, and so I'm doing these 3 little pictures of succulents. I did go ahead and sketch them out, and on the first card I'm trying a warm underpainting, so I'm doing lots of yellows and colors analogous to yellow. And in the second one I'm using a cool underpainting, so I'm doing lots of blues. And the third one, I think what I did is that I decided to do a complementary underpainting, and we're going to see if this actually makes a difference. Now, I'm kind of limited to my own ability to try to use the same colors again. It's incredibly hot today, so my paint is drying up really fast. So there will be some variation in the final picture just because I may not be able to create the exact same color every time. I also spent a lot more time on the very first picture compared to the second ones, so that might make a difference too. Now, this technique is useful for people who don't want to use too much time building up color and things. If you ever have that blank canvas syndrome where you take forever to start because the canvas is just so big and empty and you don't know how to fill it all up. The underpainting also works to fill in the tiny little holes in the canvas so that you don't have to worry so much about mixing enough color to get multiple layers, you know what I mean? Because sometimes you'll paint something, you'll spend a whole lot of time on it, and then you realize that you can kind of see through it, especially if you hold it up to the light, you know what I mean? So the underpainting helps you by starting a initial layer to kind of get that part out of the way, to make a nice, smooth, useful surface for the good stuff. So now that I'm done my little succulents, I do notice that they look extremely different from each other. I know that I kind of played it light and went through it as quickly as reasonably possible, so there's going to be some differences anyway. But my favorite part about those paintings, though, is that in the scratchy bit, you can see the underlying color through it. And personally, I think that kind of gives it more dimension. It makes it more interesting to look at. The real question is, can you do underpaintings for watercolor? Now, underpainting for watercolor would be a lot more restrictive because it is transparent. Technically, all watercolor paintings are underpainted. Regardless, I did 3 really quick and simple studies starting with different layers. I'm doing one in grayscale, which is a traditional technique actually with watercolor. The technique is called grisaille. It's when you paint the whole painting in grayscale. Beginning to end, you have a completed painting pretty much. And then you just add layers of color over top of it. And the first layer establishes your tones, your lights and darks, and then you just tint those. The second study, I am trying to do the whole thing just using primary colors. Everything in that little square is going to be painted with red, yellow, and blue. I'm not going to pre-mix any colors. I'm not going to try to mix the colors on the paper. I'm just going to add layers of flat primary color. And when the light goes through the different layers, the light will mix the colors itself, and it will appear like they are mixed colors. Very exciting. In the third one, I'm just painting normally as a constant, because I want to know if doing these different steps actually makes a difference, makes it better, if it's worth the planning of doing it. So let's find out. These studies were actually really challenging because I'm using this experimental paper. It was a sample I got. It's called Coventry Rag Vellum, and it's not particularly heavyweight. And I do notice right away that it doesn't mix very well on the paper, and I really didn't need that extra challenge during this. And that's going to be why the yellow in the flowers doesn't fade very well into the purple. That's annoying. So after these are done, I noticed that they are each very, very different. And they're actually a little bit dull because I think the yellow I'm using is not terribly transparent. And the second one, the blue really lifted as I was painting over it, so maybe that was the wrong blue to use. I can't tell you which blue it was, but yeah, that completely ruined the yellow of the flowers. I still kind of like it though. I'm pretty happy with how well the colors turned out in the end. The second one, there is a bit of a richness to them. I didn't really see a huge advantage to any of these other methods, but I wouldn't mind working a little bit more on mixing with layers of primary colors. Of course, all of these little cards are available for purchase in the shop. There's a link in the description. And let me know which method was your favorite, or if you have a completely different method that you really like to use. Maybe it's a secret. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next time.